kind of need to get.
All right, that's it. That's all I got.
That's so nice.
Hi, I am Heather. I was supposed to have somebody else here, but you're stuck with just my voice for maybe about 40 minutes, so I'll try to get it all in. I'm a special educator. I've been teaching 24 years. I've been working with individuals with disabilities since I was 10, in various babysitting and camp and group homes. And that is where my understanding and knowledge of trauma began. I worked in a group home, 10 individuals, 9 of them grew up in institutions. Some trauma that came with that. And as an 18-year-old, I'm like, what's happening? Can somebody help me? And so today we're going to talk about neurodiverse tools. That's really connected to those sensory tools. We're going to talk about those strategies for kids. And then we're going to talk about how you can advocate for those things in school, because we know that's a tricky part. We know it's not always the best part. If you need me to explain something while on a slide, feel free to jump in then say, can you explain that a little bit more? But major questions, let's hold those off to the end. Just kidding. Murphy's Law. Just kidding. There we go. Okay, so I introduced myself. This is what we're going to do in the presentation today. We're just going to define trauma. We're going to talk about what it looks like, specifically what we see in schools. We're going to talk about how we observe certain behaviors. We're going to talk about that foundational work that we ideally want all teachers, administrators, and teams working with these children and students to do. We're going to talk about how we can change our lens and how you can help advocate to change the lens. I'm going to give you some strategies that we have found that have really worked for a lot of our students. Just a quick reminder, questions, and then we have a couple of resources for you today. There we go. This is the definition that I will politely read to you. Trauma is an emotional wound resulting from a shocking event or multiple and repeated life-threatening and/or extremely frightening experiences that may cause lasting negative effects in a person, disrupting healthy, physical, emotional, and intellectual development. You can find that definition on the website. I'm sure the slides will be shared with you later. Children in adoptive, kinship, and foster homes have a history of loss and toxic stress. That means they have trauma. And so we're going to go into what that will look like.
Heather?
Yes.
Excuse me, could you talk closer to the mic, the online
Where's-
audience?
Is this the mic?
I don't know, I'm just getting a text that, please speak up, it's better with her closer to the mic.
A lot of people spend it behind the computer.
We'll
try.
Is it, see if this is a better spot.
No, that's where she was not able to hear you.
But if I'm over
there.
Go there, I'll ask her, but Trudy's also getting one of our tech people to check, so.
Okay, no worries.
I'll ask her.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So when we talk about childhood trauma, if you haven't done some of the research and information, there's a ton out there and it's quite overwhelming. Now they can't see me.
But they can see the presentation.
Just turn that's the camera. Just turn the camera.
Okay. This is like being at school. I should have stayed there today. Okay.
Their presentation is shared through Zoom, so they just need to see.
They just need to see me?
Yes.
Oh, boy. It's their lucky day, I tell you. Okay. So in school, we don't judge trauma based on race, background, foster care, kinship. We just take in trauma as it exists. We don't need to know the trauma, just that it exists. I don't need the details in order to do our work, and nobody should need those details to do the work. These are the things we see at school when we have children who present with trauma. For physical, we see a lot of poor concentration. They can't make it through lessons. We see kids have a lack of energy. Those are our students who put their heads down even before we've started teaching them for that day. A lot of students have sleep disturbances. of my 8 current students, 7 of them do not sleep through the night regularly. So they're exhausted every single school day. They can usually make it, but there are days where they just fall asleep and we let them sleep because their bodies need that. Behaviorally, we'll see a lot of impulsive behaviors. We'll see them grabbing for things, jumping in. We'll see them not understanding those physical boundaries that you're supposed to have with people. Some adults don't understand that. So, you can use those skills all around. Emotional, they may explode over things. You're like, what happened? I don't know. You may not know why they're getting upset. They may be really sad. You may see changes in their breathing rates, which can look like panic attacks, but in children, they're really those physical responses to things. So these are some of the things we see. We see more things broken down by what grade level. So in preschool, you really see that kid cannot be separated from whatever person is dropping them off. It's really a traumatic. Yes, the first month of school is tricky. Kids don't want to go to school. It's a scary place. After the first month, if this continues, then you have those worries. They cry and scream a lot. They eat poorly. I have 2 students who currently right now have night terrors every night, and they share those in different ways. At the elementary level, which is the level I am at, we see them be very fearful of certain situations. So if somebody comes in to do a presentation, they're really like, I don't know who this person is. I'm going to stand back. We see what looks like defiance, and I'm going to define defiance later. It looks like defiance. So while I'm not happy with calling it defiance, that's what people are going to call it. So we're going to connect it there because that's how people look at it. Again, they have a hard time concentrating. They're afraid of failing, so they won't even try. We start to see refusing to go to school. That can happen. The high school, middle school and high school, you start to see more of that depression, more of that social anxiety. We do see eating disorders. They are starting at younger ages. It is happening. We see, again, the refusing to go to school. Drugs and alcohol can start to become in the mix in the high school level. And then there's the risky sexual behavior. It's kind of the reason I say at the elementary school. That's a lot that brings its own level of trauma. When we talk about what we see, we only see the tip of the iceberg. So the outer world can only see that very tip, and all we ever see are behaviors. And it's how we define and how we look at those behaviors that help us to educate and make an impact more. This is where I start wearing my favorite sweatshirt that says all behaviors communication. So when people really struggle with kids and they are like, they're just acting up, I just start wearing the sweatshirt regularly because they are telling us something they don't have the skills to tell us. Many children who have ADHD, other health impairment, maybe on the autism spectrum, they often have other factors that make it impossible for them to tell us. But then if you throw in trauma, they really can't tell you what is going on, or they tell you something that makes no sense. And you're like, oh, okay, you have to take it in and just kind of listen to it and it will sort itself out. So we only see their behaviors. What's underneath is what they're feeling, their opinions. Again, as they get younger, they're going to tell you stories that you're like, okay. And then it's your job to make those connections as to why this is happening. I have a student right now who has generational trauma, is adopted, has an undiagnosed mental illness, is going through that process right now. We're sitting there working the other day and she's working along. And seems to me like all is good. She's regulated, she's sitting, she's working, looks at me, she goes, hey, Miss Murphy, do you ever think about stabbing somebody? And I go, no, but hey, what was that sight word you were writing? Because that's not the time for me to unpack that statement. A couple of weeks ago, she says to me, do you see them over there? I'm like, who? And she's then sharing that she's seeing these figures that are telling her what to do and that she doesn't understand that. These are things she's telling me. I don't have to think it's real. I don't have to think oh, I have to address this. I just need to know that this is what she's seeing. This is what she's believing. We need to be aware of values, prejudice, attitudes. I started my career in Ithaca, New York. It has Cornell, it has Ithaca College, it has a lot of different individuals from around the world. For personal reasons, I moved to a smaller district outside of Ithaca who does not have that diversity. And it was really hard for me to understand, like, why is this diversity not present here? When you don't have that diversity, you also don't have that understanding of different values and beliefs. And so trying to help others who work with me say, you can have that opinion, but that's just their culture and you can't change it. And they're like, but it's not, no, it's their culture, you can't change it. That's hard for lots of people to hear. Again, there's those dreams and that temperament. Some of my students just come in and they're grumpy for 3 hours. You just let the grump go and just keep going. Some of them come in really escalated because they're so excited to be there. And you're like, all right, let's bring that down. It's really out of control. We only ever see the behaviors. We have to do the work to get below the iceberg. We have to. It's tricky to do it. This is, again, how the external world impacts that internal world. So as we work with these children in foster care and kinship, as we work with those children who are neurodiverse or who have trauma, this outer circle all impacts them throughout the day, all day long. And again, it does not have to be things that I understand. It does not have to be things that make sense to me. So for example, my students are very visually overwhelmed nonstop. And I went through about this school year in which my contacts did not like me in the morning. And I cannot see without my contacts. So I had to wear my glasses to school today. This sent 4 of them into a town. 2 of them had no idea who I was. And I've worked with them for over a year. So 2 of them were like, where is Miss Murphy? I'm like, she's right here. So then I take off my glasses. They're like, hey, as if I just appeared out of nowhere. Been here the whole time, thanks. But I have to be cognizant that that visual piece of just my glasses changes their day. They didn't like it. So there are some days I'll come in with really red eyes because my contacts hate me and I'm gonna wear them no matter what. Tactile, I have kids who do not like clothes. Clothes are overwhelming. They've gotten better. Tagless stuff. Whoever invented that was really great. Good for them. Easy slip-on shoes. You don't have to tie. Wonderful. They're loose all the time. They're not squeezing your feet. Those can really impact kids. We have a system in my room. I don't care if you don't wear your shoes. Put them in the safe spot. So if there's an emergency, we know where everybody's shoes are. They're great about that. It's really great. Auditory. I had a student who was triggered 2 years ago by a helicopter outside. I had no idea what triggered. I was like, everything seems really calm here. What's going on? So things can trigger. Things that smell. So I talk a lot with my staff. Please do not change your shampoo. Please do not change your lotion, especially around the holidays. That's very overwhelming for our friends. Everybody loves PE. Everybody loves gym. It is the most overstimulating time of their day. Right now, the students in my school are practicing tire wrestling. That sounds great. I'm sure there's some physical growth behind it. However, they come and they're like, are you ready? And I'm like, no. But like they can't control. They now think you tire wrestle for fun. And I'm like, oh no, this is the letter A. That's what we're going to do right now. All of those things will overstimulate kids rapidly without us even knowing. I have a student that gets overstimulated just by talking about Cheetos, right? They're just Cheetos, right? No, she gets way overstimulated. And what changes with her is you see her arousal go up. She's starting to talk faster. She's starting to be more manic in her conversations. She's like, oh, I'm really sweaty. Do you have a change of shirt for me? Just talking about Cheetos. But she's getting very overstimulated. Her breathing is rapid. It almost sounds like panic attack breathing, but it's not. She has no idea she's overstimulated. She has no idea that she's going to reach that peak and not be able to self-regulate and bring it in. They cannot always identify fear, joy. They don't even identify if they're being numb, like in that situation. They can't make those connections. And we see a lot of the overheating throughout the school day. These are kids that we had extra clothes for during the school day. They'd be like, yeah, you can put on shorts and a t-shirt inside the building, even though it's 10 degrees outside. You have to change into the warm winter clothes to go home, but you can wear this at school. That's fine. So when we think about this stuff, we start to talk about our rational detachment. So this is in those situations where my brain is always processing what is happening with my students. I'm taking in lots of information all at the same time. This kid is starting to fall out of his chair because he's not really sensory regulated. So he can either blow or we can give him some sensory. This kid is aroused right now because she's breathing faster and she's talking about cheetahs. This kid who is getting some sensory now cannot stop bouncing on their ball and is manically talking. This kid has their head down and their hood over their head. So all of these things I'm taking in, and then I have to figure out how to talk to these students. Sometimes it's talking to them, sometimes it's talking with them. There's a time and a place for both. I never lose my control. I wish we could say that it never happens for anybody, but it takes a lot of work to be able to say, I need a moment. And I will tell my team, Miss Murphy will be back in about 5. She's just gonna go outside for a moment. We never embarrass a kid for what they're doing. We never say, oh, like your hood is up, like why is your hood? We don't call them out. We just let it be. We teach sarcasm because it is a common used thing in this world. So we teach it formally for our children on the spectrum because they don't understand that. But in this situation, I will not be sarcastic at all. My brain might be sarcastic. A lot of million things might run through and I might be like, don't say it out loud. I never bring up the past. I never bring up what happened last week. Oh, do you remember last week when you had your hood up? Remember what's going to happen? That doesn't work. Today's a new day. It could be a different situation. Could be the same. Children know when you're phoning it in. Oh yeah, I'm really listening to you. Yeah, okay, no, they know. They'll tell you you're not listening to me. Children don't like to be touched when they're really escalated. Even if they are that kid that crawls on your lap and likes that hug, they don't like to be touched when they're slightly escalated. They will tell you when they want it. I have one student who will take my hand and say she likes arm squeezes, so she'll put my hand here and I'm like, all right, you're ready for that. If you do those things, you become a precipitating factor. You become one of the causes for behavior. And that's a really tricky thing, to not be a cause or to own up to when you have caused it. There have been times where I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to be the trigger. And I was the trigger at that point. I have to own up and then I have to help undo it. You do want to always use that calm voice. So it was a really great conversation I had with a couple of my students. One in 1st grade, one in 4th grade, both children with a significant history of trauma. One is adopted, one has been placed in foster care before, so they both have those experiences. They both had had an explosive moment that morning. So they got overstimulated, they weren't regulated. One of them threw chairs, one of them physically hurt another adult. And so we were able to re-regulate them, get them calm, have that conversation. And then they started talking and they start talking about their own behaviors. So I'm like, oh, this ought to be a fun conversation. And the 1st grader says, you know, Miss Murphy, you always say the same thing and you always say it the same way. And I said, yep, I do. And the 4th grader goes, Miss Murphy will never change what she says or how she says it. And the 1st grader goes, well, why? She goes, because then we know. It was I was like, yeah, it works. Look at that. The kids got it. They totally got it. So they know what I'm going to say. They know how I'm going to react. Never make it a big deal. We're just going to work through this. We always maintain respect. I have a child who likes sensory. When they're escalated, they're like, I don't want you near me right now. No, that's fine. They're not being disrespectful. They're telling you what they need in that moment. Listen is tricky because we always say, oh yeah, we're adults. We know what's best. We know what's happening right now. No, we don't. We may pretend we do, but we really don't. You're listening with both your ears and you're watching their bodies. Children's bodies, especially when they're having a trauma response, especially when they're having a sensory overload response, will tell you exactly what they need in that moment. You just have to listen, which is a really hard skill. Talk less. We don't need to have long conversations about what is that. You know what is happening. We'll work through it together. Just keep it down low. We try to keep it private. We try. That's kind of tricky in schools, especially if they're having those moments in the cafeteria where all the grade level is. We try, but as much as you can, keep it as private as possible. Allow time. It should never be rushed. I've had students, it has taken all school day for us to be re-regulated. That's fine. We work that. Those are skills. Those are skills we can work on and make progress with. And then we praise them whenever we possibly can, because they feel that remorse. They feel that guilt. They feel that frustration inside. So let's talk a little bit more about rational detachment. So here are those strategies you can help your child's teacher. You can help the school administration understand. I have been lucky in both districts. We have done a lot of work around trauma-informed practices in our classrooms. We've been really lucky with that. Is it enough? No. Do I need to keep learning? Yes. Are there many facets of it? Yes. So when we're in a crisis moment, when children reach that peak of escalation and they're really frustrated and they're really overwhelmed, these are the things that we must do as individuals. So these are the things that we are going to do. We become the rational detachment. I will help you, but this has nothing to do with me. So if you hit me in this moment, it happens. I was kicked really hard in the shins the other day. I've been stabbed with a pencil before. They don't mean it. It's really hard to get to that understanding that they don't mean it, but they don't. So in the rational detachment, you're going to make sure that you're asking for help if you yourself need help. So is this a situation where I will be able to manage this on my own, or might this escalate a little bit more? Teachers should be self-aware enough to be able to say, yeah, I can't do this on my own. I need a little bit of help. Let's get the team in to help. Observe. If your child's teacher ever says, oh yeah, after 1 week together, I've noticed this. 1 week gives you no information. Multiple weeks gives you information. Sometimes we document it. Sometimes we just keep that open dialogue going. So we're like, right, this is still a fact, or this is still a factor, and we need to keep going through this. Observation should happen over multiple weeks. It is not a one-day event. So if you have a teacher or administrator say, so today I observed this, your response might be, great, let me know if you observe it again. Great. You know, like we teach a lot of our A's that work with our students. Great, you can observe that. Keep that information in your head. It doesn't change what we're doing right this moment. Using grounding, and I'll get a little bit more into sensory in a little bit, but grounding are sensory tools and sensory strategies that you can use throughout the day that help those kids to feel like they're settled in their place. So grounding looks like a number of things. And grounding should be taught before the crisis. They shouldn't be having those moments you're like, how about we do some deep pressure right now? Yeah, okay, great. No, we teach our students, we front load all of our sensory and all of our grounding activities. And you can ask for that. If your student or child is someone who has an IEP, you can say, hey, can we put pre-teaching of sensory strategies on the doc? You can do that. So we pre-teach all of those. We spend the whole first month. Yes, I teach reading, writing, and math. It's my job to teach those, but I also teach. This is a squeeze ball. This is what you can use a squeeze ball for. This is a brush. This is how you can ask an adult to brush your arms and your legs. We will never brush your body, never brush your tongue. It's been asked. We teach them all of those things. We have a peapod, which is it's a boat. It looks like a boat. It's inflated. Kids can sit in it and it hugs them and they love them. We teach them how to go in that safely. We have a pillow pit. Okay, ball pits are disgusting. Let's be honest, right? They're disgusting. So we have a pillow pit. We can take pillowcases off and wash them regularly. 4 pillows are weighted, 4 are not. We teach them how to use that and be comforted by that. So we teach those strategies ahead of time. We have calm down bins that they can access anytime that we teach them to use. These are all things you can ask for as part of your child's doc or as just good practices, but we front load it. So for example, I had a student who a traumaversary came up. Well, I didn't know it was a traumaversary. So I was like, I'm not sure what's going on. My first thing was to call the family and be like, After a week and a half, I'm noticing this. I'm just making sure there's not something I'm missing or if something has changed. And they're like, no, but this makes sense for this reason. And I was like, okay. Now, did I have a plan right away? No, because I didn't know how to address it. Once we started to develop a plan, his plan involved intense sensory. What I mean by that is this kid loved deep pressure, like deep pressure, the kind where you're like, really? You want to push harder? Okay. And so we used a grounding technique with him that uses the floor. So as they sit in a chair, if you push down, they're getting input from the top as well as the bottom. And so that was a grounding strategy that we did outside of his moments that we were then able to put in his moments to help him to regulate a little bit better. So grounding and sensory are a really great thing. Breathing. I read a report the other day that we don't really ever take a full breath, ever. I was like, well, we have to, right? But breathing is really key, and teaching children to breathe is a lot more challenging than one would think. Yes, there's a great table out there that has all of those, the flowers, it has the box breathing. Those are really good, but you must teach those. Those are not natural because we don't naturally do those breathing techniques ourselves. I don't think about breathing in a box format without really having to think about it. Children will have no idea when you're like, yes, breathe, blow out the candles. And they're like, what? That's crazy. So you're going to want to teach that. Always think before you say something. A lot of times adults, we're all guilty of it. We can be super reactive because we're just like, this is making me feel unsafe. I don't know what this is. I have to come up with a solution. Just take it in for a moment, let it be. So let's talk about that communication for a moment. There are 3 different kinds of communication that impact the way we respond to not only children, but adults. And it's a really tricky thing, and it takes a lot of work. I find myself sometimes not doing this correctly or being like, oh, right. I grew up playing lots of sports, lots of injuries that when you turn a certain age start to impact your body, right? So my shoulders just hanging hurt. My arms sitting. So I'm an arm crosser. I'll do this a lot. This is offensive to a lot of people. I'm doing it because my shoulders hurt, and if they hang, they get really painful by the time I go to bed. But that I have to cognizantly say, don't do that. That's really offensive. That's cutting people off. I have to think through that. I have a chair with arms so that my arms don't hang, so that I can be much more open. So we all understand verbal communication, but think about your audience. At this point, let's think about that executive functioning. Does everybody know what executive functioning is? Kind of yes, kind of no. Executive functioning is our ability to take in information around us and pretty much make that good choice, right? So we can rationalize when somebody cuts us off on the highway. Maybe I shouldn't run them over with my car. Depends where in New York you're driving. But like, we can think through this. Our executive functioning works. It starts storming outside. We can take that in and be like, I forgot my raincoat in the car today. All right, I'll be okay. Executive functioning, the minute a trauma response is triggered, the minute an emotional response is triggered, even if they don't have an executive functioning delay, so if they don't have ADHD, other health impairment, autism spectrum disorder, they have none of those, even when and they just have trauma, let's just say just, right? Because that's possible. Soon as an emotional response is triggered, all of that rationalization stops. So the more I talk, really, you're not listening to me. It's just going to keep just flying out of my mouth, and it means nothing to you right now. Should be short, should be simple, should be very clear. I had a student who was escalated the other day, does have an elopement plan, which means he runs off. And so we were trying to keep him safe. I was in his way. I was being kicked. My job is not to say, please stop kicking me right now. That hurts. Does it hurt? Yes, it does. Nobody wants to be kicked. My job is to say, my job is to keep you safe. We're keeping you safe. And that's all I said. I didn't repeat it like a record. I said it when I needed, and then I just stood there and did my job to keep them safe. The paraverbal, your tone, volume, and the speed. Sometimes we as adults get talking really rapidly and we have no idea that we're doing it. And then the kids are like, why do you sound like that? And greatest about 5 years ago, student goes, when you're really trying to tell me to stop doing something, and was saying this to their classroom teacher as I was helping them re-enter their classroom, you sound like that cartoon character that doesn't stop talking. And I was like, that's the greatest statement ever. Yes, that's what we saw. We said, blah, 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 blah. They heard nothing of what we said. Think about your tone. Think about that. The nonverbal is one of our most impactful ways of communicating. So one of the things I do in the summer is I go and I train our local camp counselors, because a lot of times they're high school kids who have never worked with kids with trauma or who've been in foster care or who may have disabilities. So I go and train them. And we have a whole section on body language, because your body language tells more about how you're responding to a situation than your words do, because their executive functioning made it so that they're not listening anyways. So body language, when I have a kid who is in a very unsafe situation, my body has to be authoritative. I don't want it to be that, but it has to be that. I am standing up. I am above them, really, because my kids are smaller than I am for right now, but I'm standing up. I am squared off facing them, because they need to know that this is not okay. And I need to be the adult here, and I need to control it. So I am squared up, I'm facing them. They don't always like that. It should be the last thing you use, but it's really crucial to have that and for them to understand that. And they'll start, those kids that can, will start talking about that. I don't like it when you stand like that. Great. Usually they say that when you're calm, and you can say, I don't really like it when you're throwing furniture. Oh. So if I don't throw furniture, you won't stand like that? Probably not, no. If the kid is safe, but it may be a flight risk or may turn to that more aggressive state, but they're not in that aggressive state, I'm still upright and I will turn away from them. But I'm still upright, I'm still squared off, I am angled from them. So if I need to square up and be that figure, I can be. But right now, I get it. You're angry. Like, I'll give you a moment, but this is how I need to stand. If they're in that just really upset phase and they just want somebody to connect with them, that is when you get on their level. And it can be on your terms. I don't know about you guys. I can't squat any longer, because then I can't get up from that squat. It's very painful. So I'll say to kids, oh, I'd love to, let me just go sit in this chair right here, or let me get on the ground. My students laugh. They're like, how much room do you need to roll up off the floor? I'm like, it's funny, friends, it's funny. It is funny, because they're like, one kid is like, I'll give you all your space. I'm like, thanks, great. Let me roll up. Okay, good. But like teaching them those things. So like I'm down on their level when they're upset. I'm down on their level helping them out. I don't have to touch them, but I'm there. I'm there to hear them. And the kids who want touch will crawl up on your lap. The kids who want touch will come, and I have 3 students who do what I call side by side, is they push up against me shoulder to ankle. They're just there. They're not leaning. They're just pressed up the whole side. And then I have to be like, can you sit on my left side? Because I got to teach with my right hand. And they just need that, and it works. So your body positioning is a really crucial tool. That is something that not all teachers, not all administrators know. It is something that those teams that I work with, I regularly say we have to work on our body positioning. Or I have to call them out and be like, you might have been the trigger. You totally fronted on them. It wasn't time for that. But those are some key things to know. When you have those conversations with school personnel, and I wish that the school path was easier. I wish it was smoother. As an educator, I'm going to tell you, I know it's not. I'm going to tell you that some of these learning tools are new to lots of educators. It is not required of us to have trauma-informed training. Right. It is not required of us to have cultural and diversity training. Mm-hmm. It is not required of us to understand ableism. All of those, while they are their own separate thing, they can all go in a bag, and if you use them all well, it can be super successful. It's coming. There are trainings, but again, it's finding those trainings. It's finding the ones that make sense. So it is okay to have conversations that start changing that lens. So for example, we talked about defiance earlier. I kept it on the list because yes, teachers, neighbors, friends are gonna be like, your kid's just being defiant. Are children sometimes defiant? Yes. Were we defiant? Kind of. It's children a little bit. Yes, everybody's got a defiant moment or two in their lives, but children who have trauma, who have regular trauma, who may not be able to express that, their defiance is that they are so afraid that they never feel safe, that they are constantly going to be pushing back. They're constantly going to be able to be like, I can't do that. I'm not good at that. I'm just not going to do it because I'm not good at that. So helping to change that lens. Some people say, "Oh, they're just manipulating you. They're just manipulating you so that they can get to the office and get that cookie from the principal." So that's what normally happens. Yes, sometimes children go to the principal's office and get a cookie. Children who have been escalated are going to be hungry. Their body has had that reaction. And so they're going to be hungry. And sometimes principals only have lollipops, cookies, and Skittles in their office because teachers will go down there and eat my Skittles for the day. It happens. They're not manipulating to get that cookie. They're really saying, my brain cannot survive in here. Something is really wrong and I need to get out of here and I need to save myself. Yes, again, we have all manipulated the world a little bit. Children have all manipulated the world a little bit. It happens. That is not the common thread with children with trauma. These are not, they're not defiant. They're not manipulative. They're not oppositional. They are doing these things to preserve themselves, to save themselves. They will save themselves over anything else. And in schools where there's a lot of overstimulation, a lot of demands put on kids these days, they're going to show us these things. Oppositional may be the lack of impulse control. They didn't think about that consequence before they did it. They might not think through consequences for a long time. They might make connections when they're calm with those consequences. That doesn't mean they have it. So what you're saying, if I hit that kid, that's not good. No, it's not good. Okay. What do they do the next day? I hit that kid again. It happens. So it's okay to work on changing that lens with your child's team. It's okay. It's okay to do that. It is tricky. This is probably one of the hardest paths. So I have come across some teachers in my career, some administrators in my career who go, oh, right, Heather, I read that article. Which one? Right? Which article did you read? Or I read that one. Okay. I have now attended over 20 trauma-informed seminars. Each one I'm like, oh, I was the trigger in that situation. That was all on me. I don't know all of this stuff. I have to keep learning. I have to keep learning about trauma and generational trauma, trauma connected to race and generational trauma, trauma connected to poverty. These are not things that are naturally in my toolkit. I must learn about these things. It's really hard sometimes to get teachers, especially veteran teachers, to be like, I've been doing this for 30 years. This is just the way we do it. You can be like, I understand your feelings. However, this is not meeting the needs of my child, and your job is to meet the needs of my child. They're all not going to like that I said that out loud, but it can happen and it should happen. There are those teachers that are going to be quick to judge, quick to say these three are the reasons for behaviors, and we just must provide consequences because those are the reasons. They're judging, they don't know. There are sometimes, yes, sometimes children do make bad choices or might be a little naughty because they're children. They're still navigating the world of right and wrong, and the gray area doesn't always make sense. So wait, like I can hit myself, but I can't hit that kid? Yes, sure. If that works for you, that's great. Please don't hit yourself either. And not having your own opinions. We are also quick to say, oh, Ken, we know the reason for this behavior. Or I've worked with this kid's older siblings, and this is how, like, this is just how they are. Don't judge them. This is hard. This is the hardest thing to change. This is the hardest thing to change in connection with schools. You're not alone. You have educators like me walking around being like, oh, let me help you. Let me help you understand while I'm wearing my sweatshirt. This is behavior is communication. Or I wear the t-shirt that says, be the teacher you needed as a child. And they're like, huh? And I'm like, right. So I stopped saying certain messages. I just had bought about 20 t-shirts and I rotate them through. And I'm like, hey, like I had the one like, dear person behind me, you matter. And somebody's like, why would you say that? I'm like, all right, let's keep it. So t-shirts do spread messages because you just get tired of saying them. as I've done my trauma informed strategies and care, my world has gotten bigger in who I'm connected with and where I've learned this information. It started about 12 years ago. They brought in somebody from Rochester who shared the ACEs study with us. And I'd never heard the ACEs study. So I was like, oh, what's this? Like, I want to go to this. This sounds great. And from there, it has just grown. And I was talking to someone at the beginning of this. These seminars and trainings are hard to come by. Not all schools can do them. They're becoming more expensive. And with the budgets happening with the schools, this stuff is being put on the back burner. We are trying to turnkey train those in our buildings, the people who have the knowledge. But the more we can expand on who's in our circle, whether it be like right here and then we expand out, the better off we are. That's how I ended up here. So I had a student who was in foster care at the time and had his traumaversary. And again, I'm like, wait, what's this traumaversary? I didn't know what that was. So I connected with the parent. I was like, I'm seeing this and I just want to make sure I'm not missing something. Like, did something change? Are they not sleeping through the night again? And she did the greatest thing. She goes, well, let me connect you to this person at the council. She's going to give you information. And boy, the notes I took just from a conversation were really informative and they've helped a lot. So like, it is okay to expand your community, to learn more things. Not everybody is always right. Not everybody always has the answers. It is a journey. Sometimes it's smooth, sometimes it's not. But everybody has to do the work. You will find educators that can't do the work because they don't know how. Can't do the work because they're not ready to do the work. Can't do the work because they just won't. And if I were to say otherwise, I would be lying to you. There are some educators who just won't do. I read the article, Heather. Great. It's really hard for me not to laugh at them when they say, "Oh, great. Let me give you 5 more," and then I just start overloading their mailbox, and then they start talking to me, and it all works out really well. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. But you learn through the school system, like this is the teacher that's going to have my kids back. Is that teacher going to make mistakes? Yep. There are days where I call the parent, I'm like, yeah, we were doing well, and then we had a moment, and I might have triggered them because I put the snacks away a little too early today, but we were trying to clean the cup. I was the trigger. I apologize for being the trigger. We worked it through, but just so you know, I was the trigger. Not everybody can eat that slice of humble pie and say, I was the trigger. But there are days where I'm like, yep, it was me. Sorry, totally me. I'm wearing my glasses today, everybody. It's me. It's all me. They were so mad. And then I can't see without my glasses on. So of course, he kept taking them off, and I'm like, I can't teach you with no glasses on. These are the things that each individual or each component of a child's world can look at and do. Home, it's wonderful if the home can communicate with us, but you don't have to overshare. I said this earlier. I don't need to know what the trauma is. I just need to know that there was trauma. That's all I need to know. I don't need the details because we get caught up in the details. Yes, sexual abuse is awful. It is. I don't need those details to work with this child. In fact, I don't want those details because that changes my ability to self-care and sleep at night. So just tell me there was trauma and we'll address it. Building trust. It's tricky, right? I heard in an earlier conference, it's frustrating working with schools, right? Sometimes feels like you're fighting the schools to get your child's needs met. And I wish that was easier for you. I'm trying to make it easier in my little pocket. But if you can like continuously build that trust, and it shouldn't just be you building that trust, but you have to be open enough for us to like try to connect with you and have that trust. Your administration should be looking for education, for understanding of trauma and co-regulation. Co-regulation is really the most successful way we can work through children with trauma and neurodiverse needs. The administrator should be modeling those tools and skills. So if you are meeting with your school principal and they happen to say, oh yes, I read that article. Okay, they got some work to do, right? In your classroom, that teacher should be doing that observation. We talked about that a couple times. More than one day, more than 1 week, regular observation. And then there's that consistency that we talked about, being that like the 4th grader telling my 1st grader, yes, she's never going to change what she says in response to that. I always say the same thing, Miss Murphy. Right. because you can be angry. You may not throw chairs. I always say that. I will always say that statement. We'll never not say, yes, by all means, throw the chairs right now. You can ask if this is a student or a child with an IEP, you can ask for specific language on the IEP. And here are some key ones. Pre-teaching of sensory input and calming strategies in teaching. Another one is consistent language. This is a tricky one because then you have some people who are like, well, can we have that list? And you're like, well, it's not really like a list. We can make you the list, but you can ask for consistent language on an IEP. You can ask for access to a quiet space to calm down. These are all things I put on my students' IEPs because we taught them these skills. Do they always use them? Nope. Are they always successful? Nope. But we've taught them these skills. That just means I have to teach them again, which is fine. That's what I'm a special education teacher. That's part of my job. But there's specific language you can ask for on IEPs that really connect to this. New York State, couldn't tell you how to find it because it's in that hidden wormhole. But if you, right, the New York State Education Department wormhole, that's a fun one. But Google accommodations on an IEP and things will come up. You didn't hear that from me. Okay, great. Fabulous. In this process of these three components working together for a child's success and development, please know that mistakes will happen. It's not a perfect path. Mistakes are going to happen. The mistake should never be intentional or harmful. Again, I totally own up. Yep, I was a trigger. I caused that one today. We'll fix it and reteach it. It's not a problem, but they will happen. It's not a perfect system. There's no way to make it a perfect balance with all of this. Let's talk about strategies that we use at school to help us be more successful in working with these individuals with neurodiverse needs, sensory needs, and trauma backgrounds. They're in no specific order. The list is just there. It's not like we go down this list. Tapping out. Tapping out is when you yourself need a break. You need to know yourself. I had a student who had been bounced around. He had been in foster care at some point. He went to one school and they classified him as a student with autism. He went to another place and they said he had ADHD. He went to school, he came to us. He lived in a home where domestic violence was common. He was super reactive, and it was in the age of our masks for COVID. Fun teaching with those on, I'll tell you. So he would pull down his mask, and then he'd pull down your mask, and he'd spit in your face. And spitting is a trigger for me. I have been bit, I have been stabbed, I've had pencils, just put it. I have been called everything in the world. The minute I get spit on, it takes a lot of work for me to go, I'll be right back. It really is a visceral reaction for me. I don't care for it. I must tap myself out at that point. Great, it's your turn. This is not a good situation for me to continue. We use tapping out at school. We use co-regulation. I have a student who is currently with his biological family, but did spend some of his toddler years in foster care for many reasons. He is also a student on the spectrum. He's also a student with severe apraxia. He cannot physically speak. He cannot make the sounds to speak. He tries, but he can't. So he has a talking device, but he had no way to say he was frustrated before this device. He had no way to tell us something was wrong. So what did he do? He stood there and started screaming at the top of his lungs, which he had not screamed. Everybody thought somebody's being murdered in our classroom. Nobody's being murdered. So we had to teach him first, you're going to calm down. We're going to do breathing. So now his breathing is this. That's how he breathes when he's. So I know he's mad these days when he comes up to me and he goes, all right, let's breathe together. So we would sit and we would practice breathing. Take those deep breaths, blow them out like S sounds. Then we taught him on his device when he wasn't escalated how to say, this is what I need. Does it always work? No. Did the device get thrown at us when we couldn't find the word? You bet, because no program is simple. But we constantly co-regulate with him. And now like he'll look at me and he'll just go, "Da," thinking I know what that means, which I don't always. Sometimes I'm like, get your device, because I don't know what "da" that one is today. But we taught in co-regulation. Sensory. Again, this is what we front load our school year with. It is great to front load the school year with this, but you have to teach it. So you know those like those stretchy bands, like some people call them like the snakes or things like that. What do you think kids like to do with those? Woo, right? It's all fun and games until the kid next to them gets smacked with it and you're like, ah. So we teach them this is what this is for. We're not going to swing it around. It's not your lasso right now. We teach the sensory tools. We teach them how to use them. We teach them how to ask for them. Sensory is great. And we just actually did a trauma-informed workshop at my school on a half day. It was all right. She talked to us for 2 straight hours, read the slides to us one after another. After about 45 minutes, I was like, I can't pay attention any longer. But she said something I didn't know, and I hadn't learned yet. That sensory is super helpful when you're using both the left and the right side of your body at the same time. And so we knew sensory was great. We provide running opportunities. We teach them how to bear walk or something along those lines. But it is even better if you can get both sides of your body moving from your feet to the top of your shoulders. Forget the head. Just get that moving and you can regulate a student much more rapidly. So that was great information. Like I said, we teach those skills when they're calm. I'm not going to teach how to use one of those snakes when they're angry. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be snapped with it. We talked about knowing your triggers. Hate being spit on. Hate being spit on. I have a lot of kids with trauma right now. My bucket gets empty really rapidly in the school day because I absorb their trauma. It's my job to absorb their trauma. It's my job to support my staff so they don't absorb the trauma. So there are 10 minutes a day where I'm like, you may not talk to me for 10 minutes. And my room never doesn't have kids in it. So I have to be really cognizant of go outside. I don't care if it's raining, Heather, go sit on the stoop. And then my principal calls, she's like, are you fine? I'm like, yes, I'm just filling my bucket. Shh, it's fine, leave her be. But know your strategies. No cultural code switching. Know that the way you say things at school is not always the way it's said at home. So we have students who come from households in which they are not asked, what should you be doing? It's a favorite teacher phrase. What should you be doing right now? What? My kids are like, oh. My kids are super honest. What? Was I supposed to be doing something? So you have to change it. We change it to say, your job is to sit down. Your job is to take out your work or just get your work out. They can say, I don't want to, that's fine. But what should you be doing makes no sense. You can ask for that when you say consistent language on a doc. Please don't ask my kid what they should be doing. Just tell my child what they should be doing. It's so much easier. Emergency and evacuation plans. Nobody wants to talk about it. It happens. Kids can get so escalated and angry. We have to leave the room. We have to keep other kids safe. We do. It is a reactive plan, but it doesn't have to be chaotic or punitive. There are times you have to have that happen for the safety of all students. It should be a plan. It should happen calmly. And I say this for adults as well. It should have a regrounding procedure afterwards, so you let everybody voice their fears and concerns. And it should have acceptance at the end. That kid is back part of our classroom. It is okay. We are safe. We can do this. That is sometimes something we have to use. I hate to say it, it is a reality of schools. Children are more complex these days. They are harder. After 24 years, I'm like, oh, I got 10 more. Can I do this? Can I make it this far? You have to do it. It is okay to say, hey, can we discuss this plan when my child is so escalated so that it is not chaotic. It feels chaotic, but again, if we co-regulate, we make it move nice and smooth. And that's hard to do. There are Fridays where I'm so tired. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm teaching next week. Just go home and everybody's like, oh, teachers drink a lot of wine. Teachers just want to be in their pajamas on Friday night with no alarm clock on Saturday. It's really all we want. That's real. I don't need a glass of wine. I just need my pajamas.
Can you give an example of the emergency evacuation plan?
Yes. So when a child is so escalated that they start using classroom furniture as weapons, so desks are not lights. We have children who can pick up desks, and if they're throwing desks, and you can't safely remove that kid, so you can't say, hey, let's go get that cookie in the principal's office. That didn't work, right? Or the lollipop, then you have to remove the other children for safety. And so it's not one of those, kids, run. You just, no. It should be like, let's give our friends some space so that they can feel better in their body. and then we just go. And then it should not, and then the regrouping plan should only include the follow-up that needs to be followed up on. If they didn't hurt anybody's body and they didn't hurt anybody's heart, a sorry is not how you fix that situation. So children should be taught, if you hurt my body or heart, you should apologize. That is a respectful thing that many human beings should do in general. I say that loosely. But if they destroy the room, hey, can you help me clean up this room? Not like your job will be to clean this room. Hey, can you help me clean this up? I had a kid who dumped a bin with 1,000 beads. They went flying everywhere. One of my kids on the spectrum loved it, was like stinning with it. They were like, it's like raining beads. I'm like, oh my God, that's so many beads. Didn't say anything. We got her calm, we got her regulated. I said, I'm just gonna start cleaning up these. You let me know when you're ready and we can connect. She came over, she did she was leaning, she was pushing against my whole side. We just picked up beads together. I don't have to say it, they know it. They're upset about it. They didn't want it to happen. They have remorse. But the plan, you have to use the plan when safety is a big concern. We use it very little. We often teach our kids, look, everybody's regulated. We got to figure it out. Here are your headphones. They're like, what are headphones for? I'm like, smart people put them on, should model them. My favorite is when they put them on, they're like, you can't teach me. I'm like, okay, great. It's not always written on a doc that there's an evacuation plan. But if you have a kid who's super explosive, you should ask, has the classroom ever been cleared? Have they ever had to be removed from the classroom? I'm not going to tell you these situations don't occur, because that would be lying. But I'm also going to tell you that if it does happen or is happening, you should have like, okay, so what are the steps that the class is removed? What is the language that is used? What do the kids do when they're not in the classroom? How do we get everybody back together? What's that? It should never be a let's be back in the room together and just moving on like it never happened. We talked about it to the best of their ability. We had to leave the room. Yes.
So in that particular year evacuation plan, do you generally have the person, because it might not be you, that has the best relationship with that student that's losing it to remain in that room where, and the other person or people take the other thing?
And usually we put 2 adults in the room.
Okay.
There should be 2 adults. It should never just be 1 adult.
And the one that has the good relationship, yeah.
It should be. It should never be an adult that is a trigger. Ever.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Never be the
Because I
adult
don't
that's the
think people
trigger.
I sometimes feel like teachers think, the head teacher, I should say, think that they're the ones that has to stay there, but if you're the
Nope.
one, yeah, because it could be Mr. Joe that's really.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can ask, like, who is my child's favorite adult
Yes,
at school?
exactly.
Ask that question. Who is my child's favorite? Like a lot of times the kids will be like, Ms. Murphy's not my favorite. She says I have to do my writing. She's like, I gotta write my name every day. Life skills, buddy. Let's keep going. But yes, that was a great point. Yes.
Sorry, just because my whole question around this. I'm in Ithaca School District, and there was a situation where there were 2 really kind of dysregulated children in the classroom. You may even know the situation.
Probably.
But it took months because it was evacuation happening 3 times a day. And I don't think the teacher was trauma-informed or just didn't know how to handle the kids. And it took the parents getting involved, the administration, the Board of Education, all of this to get these kids out of the classroom. And it's just almost a comment that there's not trauma-informed teaching instruction in Ithaca. And
I was born and raised in Ithaca, by the way. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, and that's really, yeah,
It is.
It's, I mean, I don't know, with the teachers union, they can't enforce any of these trainings.
And that's where the administration should be involved, is that they should be helping. Like, I had a really great principal while I was in Ithaca, and I was like, I don't know what the ACEs study is. What is this? I want to go. And then that sparked us. So I was like, ooh, here's another one. But you have to find the trainings. Like COVID had a bunch of them, but they were all virtual, which was great. But now that they've gone back to in-person training, they're hard to find.
So you can come and teach.
No, thank you. I left it. I left Ithaca 5 years ago. I'm good. No, like and I'm not knocking Ithaca. I loved Ithaca. I needed a smaller caseload. I went from 24 students regularly to 8. It just helped my mental illness. I do absorb a lot of my students' trauma. My bucket is empty regularly. I needed a change for me. And that's just my story. I know we have we're almost done. I want you to think first and foremost, not that these kids have trauma, not that they're difficult, not that these children are on the spectrum and the world won't understand them, not that these kids have anything. These kids have wonderful strengths. These are the strengths we see every day in our students. And we praise them for these things every day. And we make it a point. So like in my room, we take pictures of the kids and we have a huge picture wall. We celebrate them with doing their work, with playing on the playground, with like, sometimes they come and they're like, take my picture, I look silly. I'm like, sure. Okay. But we celebrate them. We make it a point to celebrate them because they have a lot of strengths. They are the first to be like, hey, Miss Murphy, I was at recess with so-and-so also in my room, and they were making fun of them, and I told them to stop. Great job. Thanks for being guardian of justice. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate that. Hey, Miss Murphy, you know how I say we should do our work before we get a break? What do you say like I do one work job and then get a break, and then I'll go back to my work? Does it always work? No, but it's a good idea, right? No, just do your work. We celebrate them with their artwork. We make sure that we put up whatever they want. They could draw us a bit. One kid drew me an escape plan after you rob the bank. This is how you get out of the bank. I went up on the wall. I was like, that's the greatest. What bank is this? I didn't know. Which one are we robbing? But we also have high expectations. My kids will say to me, my job at school is to do my work. We teach them that. Is it the most important thing? No, we want them to be loved and safe and healthy and happy. But we also want them to read and be successful in society. And you can't do so without reading. So my job is to teach them reading, writing, and math, and then a whole bunch of other skills. But I'll say your job is, and they'll go, to do my work. Okay, great. Whenever you're ready, you let me know. They have lots of strengths. So as you think about your own child or your own student, think about their superpower first, and then worry about the rest later. We do have some fun handouts over there from the coalition. There's a great book that I know is on the table out there. And now it's time for questions. Yes.
I want to add to the evacuation plan. So I work in a trauma-informed school, and what we would do is we'd have a primary point person. That's the person that that the child works with really good. That's the calm down. If there's an issue rising, they know if I'm having a hectic day, I can go to this person. So when we had to clear rooms, and it was high school, so it can get really crazy in high school. So the primary, immediately they get on the phone, primary point person comes in, dean's outside, principal, everybody is on the team. And then we will evacuate the classroom out and have a safe space for them. So there is a procedure of how it can go, but the child now knows, and they want to leave the room too. They start saying, oh, it's getting claustrophobic, I don't want to be in here. And it's a lot of things, but they know how to de-escalate. And with that primary point person, most of the time, it can get crazy, but most of the time they know how to hold space for them and calm them down because they don't want to hurt that person. That's their person.
That's their person.
That's their person.
And
like they really,
the remorse is so strong if they do. It's it's really, that's a hard one.
It's amazing when they see that person coming, normally the calm already starts to come down. They're like, Miss Singh is coming, and it's
Right.
so
Miss Murphy's here.
yeah.
I really love you, but not right now.
Even if they get in an altercation outside, once they know that I'm coming, they're like, let's clear the area because they don't want to disrespect you. So it's a
No,
lot that goes
and
into
it's hard. Like sometimes they're so escalated, they can't stop it.
Mhm.
It just has to. It's like us. Like there are things that make us really angry. We learn skills, or should have learned skills as adults, that we can then process through it. But it's not perfect.
And if you want to see kids drive, show them that you care. Once they know that that person cares, you can make magic happen.
Murphy, you love me every day. You don't like it when I make good choices? I like it when you make good choices. Oh, it's the bad choices. Yeah, I don't like those. Those are the ones I don't like, buddy. Yes.
coach in the Kiganadao area, and one of the things that the schools in our district do are use the TCIS, which is out of Cornell. And so they have some really good resources on post-crisis response, formulating those plans.
And the hard thing is getting people to understand it is not restraint training. That is not what that is. When they hear that, they're like, restraint training. It is not restraint training, and it is a great training that I do regularly.
So TCIS. Yeah, actually, I at our BOCES, I don't even offer the restraint portion anymore because we get the wrong set of people.
Yep.
Sometimes you do.
I mean, the only piece I ever liked about the restraint training piece of it was how to keep my body safe.
Protective stances.
Yeah, and just like, because I don't want to get hurt either when they're upset. I get it that you're upset, but you don't want to be hurt right now. You're a really big fourth grader. So, yes.
Are you using behavior plans?
Sometimes, yes. A lot of times we use the behavior plans to remind them of expectations throughout the day, and then to have the open conversation about it. So like I have a student who's like, who can now honestly talk about their behavior. We do have incentives in it, but it's more about the conversation. This is a kid who's like, hey, can I have like an extra pack of like fruit snacks? I'm like, yeah, sure. But I'm like, yeah, just get this done real quick and let's do that. But yes, we use behavior plans as a way to talk about their behaviors. These are your expectations. How do you think you did with this? Well, I did my work, but I was really disrespectful. All right, so what can we do to help with that? Or I did my work, but I broke all the colored pencils while doing it. Do you not like colored pencils? Do you want crayons instead? We can make that happen. Perfect. We'll do one more question. Yes.
So anybody else can answer this. So as a special education advocate, this past year, and we should also have, not teacher appreciation week, but I also think that, advocacy. And I appreciate you sharing also that you need to tap out because I take everything in too.
Right.
And it affects your mental health, affects your physical.
It does.
One of my questions, and this has been the year of manifestation.
Yes, it has. You're correct.
We're like 6-year-olds. Yes, thank you. So one of the things that they're saying that inappropriate behaviors, this and that, all the other things. And I think after hearing all of this information, I've always been going back to whatever the actual medical diagnosis or the classification is. And and I just don't see how people don't connect the dots. And this is one area, especially if it's a child that's been in foster care or adopted care. Is there a way to gently kind of say, look, because the parents are usually in the meeting as well as the students, see where I'm going with that? To gently kind of say, hey, has this district had any kind of education regarding trauma and medicine?
Again, probably not anybody's in the school system's favorite comment. Bring it up at a board meeting. Go to one of the open board meetings and say, this district needs this, and this is why, and the research supports this. The Board of Education can push it a little bit faster at the end as well. I'm sorry, we do have to,
Okay.
they're kicking me out.